Found out my parents secretly used my college fund on my sister's car and her vacations, while telling me to quit college and take a year off because they can't fund my education. My younger sister, Viv, recently graduated from high school. However, this hasn't been a straightforward journey for her, by any means. In fact, she failed high school twice before, and this was her third attempt. Viv has always struggled academically. From a young age, school is never her strong suit, and she found it extremely difficult to keep up with her peers. It wasn't just about bad grades. She also had a hard time staying focused and motivated, which really affected her performance. At first, she made up excuses, claiming she was dyslexic. However, after multiple tests, it was ruled out. Without that excuse, she started acting out and getting into trouble. Countless times, she was caught smoking weed with older students at her high school. She would often skip classes to go to parties, which would lead to teachers calling my parents to complain. My parents were constantly at their wits' end. They tried talking to her, but that didn't work. They tried grounding her, but Viv always found a way to sneak out, often in the middle of the night, to meet up with friends or even random boyfriends she met online. During this time, instead of holding Viv accountable for her actions, my parents often turned their frustration toward me. They blamed me for not being a good older sister and said it was my job to guide her and show her how to be a better person. It wasn't that I didn't care about her, I did. I wanted to be a good sister. But the truth was, Viv never listened to me. Anytime I tried to talk her out of doing something reckless, she'd get upset and defensive. After a while, I stopped trying to intervene. I hated the constant fighting and feeling like it was somehow my responsibility to change her behavior when nothing I did seemed to help. So I just let things go. It was easier to keep the peace that way, even though I knew deep down it wasn't helping Viv make better decisions. One early morning, chaos broke out in our house. My mother, as was her routine, woke up and went to check on both me and Viv. But when she entered Viv's room, she found it empty. I was jolted awake by the sound of my mom screaming and yelling at me and my dad, demanding to know where Viv was. Half asleep and confused, I rushed to Viv's room, hoping maybe she had left a note or some sign of where she'd gone. But there was nothing. We tried calling her, but her phone was switched off, which only escalated the panic. At that point, we were ready to call the police. There was no trace of her, and we had no idea if she was safe or what might have happened. The whole situation was terrifying, and my parents were beside themselves with fear. Just as we were about to contact the authorities, one of our mutual friends reached out to me in private and confessed something shocking. Viv had gone out again to meet a stranger, someone she had met online for a date. A wave of dread washed over me as I told my parents. Thankfully, that friend knew the guy's address, since Viv had shared it with her. With this new information, we immediately drove to the guy's place. When we arrived, my mom didn't hesitate. She barged into the place, screaming Viv's name. The look on Viv's face when she saw us was a mixture of shock and embarrassment. She couldn't believe we had found her. Thankfully, nothing dangerous had happened between her and the guy. He seemed just as surprised as we were. He had no idea Viv was underage. Apparently, she had lied to him about her age, pretending to be older. My dad, furious, threatened the guy before practically dragging Viv out of there. The car ride home was filled with shouting and accusations. Viv was defiant as usual, arguing with our parents at every turn while my mom tried to make her understand the gravity of what she had done. It was one of the most tense and exhausting car rides I can remember. Viv was also furious at me for contacting our mutual friend and getting the guy's address from her. She kept telling me how she could have just snuck back home later and that all I had to do was keep my mouth shut. My sister clearly didn't recognize how serious her actions were and how worried we all were for her safety. When we finally got home, my mom grounded Viv. I thought maybe this would be a turning point, but that's not what happened. Instead, after this close call, my parents became almost overly protective of Viv. They were so terrified by the thought of losing her that they started giving in to her demands just to keep her safe and sound at home. Viv also realized just how much leverage she had. She knew that as long as they were afraid of her running off or getting into trouble, they would give her what she wanted, and she exploited that advantage. Even when Viv failed high school for the first time, I expected some sort of consequence, maybe a serious talk or some discipline to set her back on track. But instead, my parents didn't even scold her. Rather than addressing the issue head-on, they told her they understood how difficult high school could be and encouraged her to try again, almost as if failing was no big deal. They believed they were supporting her by being understanding and patient, but to me, it felt like they were turning a blind eye to the reality of the situation. While they thought they were doing right by her, their leniency was only reinforcing her belief that she didn't have to take responsibility for her actions.